Sarah Mitchell had perfected the art of being invisible in plain sight. For 15 years, she had lived as the perfect suburban mother in Winchester, driving her 2 children to school every morning, attending PTA meetings, and hosting dinner parties that her neighbors still talked about months later. No one suspected that the woman who made the best chocolate cake in the neighborhood had once been one of MI6's most lethal operatives. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Sarah dropped off Emma and James at school, exchanged pleasantries with the other parents, and returned home to her immaculate kitchen. She poured herself a cup of coffee and opened her laptop to work on her freelance graphic design projects. The routine was so established, so normal, that even she sometimes forgot about the woman she used to be. That version of herself felt like a character from a movie she had watched long ago. Agent Nightshade, they had called her. The woman who could eliminate a target from 1,000 yards away or make a death look like a heart attack using nothing but a fountain pen. That woman had been deadly, efficient, and completely without attachments. This woman, Sarah Mitchell, was everything Agent Nightshade had never been allowed to be. The first sign of trouble came through an encrypted email that appeared in an account she thought she had deleted years ago. The subject line was simple. "Remember Prague?" Sarah's coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering against the kitchen floor as memories she had buried deep came flooding back. Prague 2008, her final mission before she walked away from everything. The assassination of Viktor Kozlov, a Russian arms dealer who had been selling weapons to terrorist organizations across Europe. It should have been clean, simple, final. But something had gone wrong, not with the mission itself, but with what came after. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the email. Inside was a single photograph that made her blood run cold. It showed her, 15 years younger, walking away from a hotel in Prague just hours after Viktor Kozlov's body had been discovered. She was wearing a blonde wig and sunglasses, but the camera had caught her profile perfectly. Below the image was a message that made her stomach drop. "We know who you are, Sarah. We know what you did. Pay us £5 million or the world learns about the loving mother who used to kill people for a living. You have 72 hours. Sarah deleted the email immediately, but she knew it was too late. Someone had found her. After all these years of careful living, of building a life that was completely separate from her past, someone had connected Sarah Mitchell to Agent Nightshade. She sat in her kitchen, surrounded by the broken pieces of her coffee cup, and tried to think rationally. Who could have this information? MI6 had assured her that all records of Agent Nightshade had been classified at the highest levels. Her handler, Marcus Webb, had personally guaranteed that her identity would remain buried forever. The only people who knew about Prague were dead, retired, or had every reason to keep silent. The sound of her phone ringing made her jump. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but somehow she knew this call was connected to the email. She let it go to voicemail, then played the message back. A woman's voice, speaking with a slight Eastern European accent, said, "Hello, Sarah. I hope you received our message. We're not unreasonable people. We simply want what we're owed. Viktor Kozlov was more than just an arms dealer, you see. He was my brother." Sarah's mind raced. Viktor Kozlov had a sister. This wasn't in any of the intelligence briefings she had received before the Prague mission. Either MI6 had missed this crucial detail, or they had deliberately withheld it from her. The voice continued, "I've spent 15 years looking for the person who murdered Viktor. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that the killer was living such a pleasant little life in England. I have to admit, you've done well for yourself. Beautiful children, loving husband, nice house. It would be a shame if they learned the truth about who you really are." The message ended, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in horror. This wasn't just about money. This was about revenge, and the person seeking that revenge had made it clear that they knew everything about her current life. Sarah walked to her bedroom and pulled out a suitcase from the back of her closet. Hidden in a secret compartment was everything that remained of Agent Nightshade: fake passports, emergency cash, and a secure phone that could contact her old handler. She had hoped she would never need these things again. She dialed Marcus Webb's number, praying he was still alive and still working for MI6. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Sarah, is that you?" "Marcus, thank God, I need help. Someone knows who I am." There was a long pause. "That's impossible. Your file was classified beyond top secret. Only 3 people in the entire agency know your real identity." "Well, someone else knows now. They have photographs from Prague. They know about Viktor Kozlov. Another pause, longer this time. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. Viktor Kozlov's file was reopened 6 months ago. There was a leak in the Prague station. Someone sold information about several old operations, including yours. Sarah felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Who? We don't know yet. We're still investigating. But Sarah, you need to disappear. Now, take your family and run. I can't do that, Marcus. My children have lives here. My husband has no idea who I really am. I won't destroy their lives because of something I did 15 years ago. Then you need to eliminate the threat. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah knew what Marcus was suggesting. She would have to become Agent Nightshade again. She would have to kill to protect the life she had built as Sarah Mitchell. I can't do that either. I'm not that person anymore. Then you're in serious trouble because that person has found you. And from what you're telling me, they want more than just money. They want revenge. After hanging up with Marcus, Sarah sat in her bedroom and tried to process everything that was happening. 15 years of peaceful life were about to be destroyed by a single mistake from her past. She had always known this day might come, but she had hoped it never would. The worst part was that she couldn't tell David, her husband, the truth. How could she explain that the woman he had married, the mother of his children, was someone who had killed people for a living? How could she make him understand that everything about their life together was built on a lie? David worked as an accountant for a small firm in town. He was kind, gentle, and completely innocent of the darker realities of the world. He believed that Sarah had worked for the Foreign Office in her previous career, doing administrative work that she preferred not to talk about. He had never questioned her reluctance to discuss her past, accepting her explanation that government work was often boring and confidential. Sarah heard the front door open and David's voice calling out, "I'm home early. Thought we could have lunch together." She quickly hid the suitcase and composed herself, walking downstairs to greet her husband with a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "That's wonderful, darling. How was your morning?" David kissed her cheek and noticed the broken coffee cup on the kitchen floor. "What happened here?" "Just clumsy. You know how I get when I'm concentrating on work." As David cleaned up the broken pieces, Sarah watched him and felt her heart breaking. This man had loved her completely and unconditionally for 12 years. He had never asked her to be anything other than herself, never demanded that she reveal secrets she couldn't share. And now, because of who she used to be, his entire world might be about to collapse. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table with Emma and James, Sarah found herself memorizing every detail. The way Emma wrinkled her nose when she laughed. The way James always saved his favorite food for last. The way David looked at her with such complete trust and love. These people were her world now. They were worth more to her than anything she had ever done as Agent Nightshade. And she would do whatever it took to protect them, even if it meant facing the darkest parts of her past. After the children went to bed, Sarah made a decision. She wouldn't run, and she wouldn't kill unless absolutely necessary. Instead, she would use everything Agent Nightshade had taught her to find out who was threatening her family and stop them permanently. She went to her computer and began researching Viktor Kozlov's family, using skills she hadn't employed in over a decade. By the time David came to bed, she had a name. Alina Kozlov, Viktor's younger sister, who had spent the last 15 years building a criminal empire across Eastern Europe. Alina wasn't just seeking revenge for her brother's death. She was using this information to eliminate a potential threat to her own operations. Agent Nightshade had been too good at her job, and Alina couldn't risk her coming out of retirement to interfere with her business. Sarah looked at David sleeping peacefully beside her and made another decision. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of becoming Agent Nightshade again. Not to kill, but to protect everything that mattered to her. The game had begun, and Sarah Mitchell was going to play it with every skill Agent Nightshade had ever possessed. But this time, the stakes weren't a mission or a country's security. This time, she was fighting for her family, her life, and the woman she had chosen to become. As she lay in bed, planning her next moves, Sarah realized that the past 15 years hadn't been a lie. They had been the most honest years of her life. She had discovered who she really was when she stopped being who others needed her to be. Now she had to find a way to be both women, Sarah Mitchell, the loving mother and wife, and Agent Nightshade, the lethal operative, because her family's survival depended on it. Sarah woke up at 4 in the morning, her body automatically reverting to the sleep schedule she had maintained during her operative years. She slipped out of bed without waking David and made her way to the garage, where she had hidden her emergency kit behind a false panel she had installed years ago. Inside the kit were items that Sarah Mitchell would never need, but Agent Nightshade couldn't live without: untraceable phones, surveillance equipment, lock picks, and several weapons that were supposedly impossible for civilians to obtain. She had told herself she kept these things as insurance, but now she realized she had been preparing for this day all along. The first step was surveillance. Sarah needed to know who she was dealing with and what resources they had at their disposal. Alina Kozlov had found her, which meant Alina had access to intelligence networks that went far beyond typical criminal organizations. This wasn't going to be a simple matter of avoiding some angry relatives. Sarah set up a monitoring station in her home office, using equipment that looked like standard computer hardware, but was actually capable of intercepting communications and tracking digital footprints. While her family slept, she began building a profile of the woman who wanted to destroy her life. Alina Kozlov had been 22 when her brother Victor was killed in Prague. At the time, she was a minor figure in the family business, handling money laundering through a chain of restaurants across Eastern Europe. But Victor's death had changed everything. Within 5 years, she had consolidated power and expanded the organization into human trafficking, cybercrime, and weapons dealing. What made Alina particularly dangerous was her intelligence and patience. Unlike her brother, who had been flashy and careless, Alina operated in the shadows. She had never been arrested, never been photographed by law enforcement, and had managed to build a criminal empire while maintaining the facade of being a legitimate businesswoman. The research revealed something else that made Sarah's blood run cold. Alina had been systematically hunting down everyone involved in Victor's assassination. The Prague station chief had died in a car accident 3 years ago. The intelligence analyst who had identified Victor as a target had committed suicide 2 years later. Even the cleaning crew who had sanitized the hotel room after the killing had met with mysterious accidents. Sarah was the final name on Alina's list, but she had been the hardest to find. Agent Nightshade's real identity had been so deeply buried that it had taken Alina 15 years and a security leak to uncover it. By 6 in the morning, Sarah had developed a preliminary plan. She couldn't wait for Alina to make the next move, because that would put her family in immediate danger. Instead, she needed to take control of the situation by making Alina believe she was still the same lethal operative she had been 15 years ago. Sarah prepared breakfast for her family, maintaining the routine that was so important to her cover identity. As David and the children ate, she studied their faces, knowing that everything she did from this point forward was to protect these moments. "You're quiet this morning," David observed, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "Just thinking about a project deadline," Sarah lied, managing a smile that felt more natural than she had expected. After dropping the children at school, Sarah drove to London instead of returning home. She had an appointment with someone she had hoped never to see again: Thomas Hartley, a man who existed in the gray area between MI6 and the criminal underworld. Hartley operated an antique bookstore in Bloomsbury that served as a front for information brokering. During her operative years, Sarah had used his services when she needed intelligence that wasn't available through official channels. He was expensive, discreet, and completely amoral, which made him perfect for what she needed. The bookstore looked exactly the same as it had 15 years ago: dusty, overcrowded, and apparently deserted. Sarah made her way to the back room, where she found Hartley sitting behind a desk covered with rare manuscripts. Well, Agent Nightshade returns from the dead," Hartley said without looking up. "I was wondering when you'd darken my doorstep again. I need information on Alina Kozlov." Hartley finally looked at her, his pale eyes taking in her suburban mother appearance. "You've certainly changed your look, very domestic. I almost didn't recognize you. Can you help me or not?" "Of course I can help you. The question is whether you can afford my prices. Alina Kozlov isn't just any criminal. She's become one of the most powerful people in Eastern Europe. Information about her costs extra." Sarah placed a stack of cash on the desk, money she had been saving for Emma's university fund. "This is all I can access without raising suspicions." Hartley counted the bills and nodded. This will buy you a basic profile and current location. If you want operational intelligence, you'll need to pay more. Basic profile for now. 20 minutes later, Sarah had a dossier that confirmed her worst fears. Alina Kozlov wasn't just seeking revenge. She was building a case to expose Sarah's identity publicly. Alina had evidence of 3 other assassinations Sarah had carried out during her MI6 career, and she was preparing to release everything to international media. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Alina would destroy Sarah's life by revealing her past, then sit back and watch as MI6 either abandoned her or eliminated her to prevent further exposure. Either way, Alina would get her revenge without having to kill Sarah herself. "There's something else," Hartley said, sliding another document across the desk. "Alina has a daughter, 15 years old, lives in Switzerland at a very expensive boarding school. The girl doesn't know about her mother's business, thinks Alina is just a successful entrepreneur." Sarah stared at the photograph of a teenage girl who looked remarkably like her mother. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Alina's weakness is the same as yours. She's built a life around protecting someone innocent. If you're smart, you'll use that." Sarah left the bookstore with more questions than answers. Alina Kozlov was more dangerous than she had initially believed, but she also had vulnerabilities. The question was whether Sarah could exploit those vulnerabilities without becoming the kind of person Agent Nightshade had been. She drove home, her mind racing with possibilities and consequences. Every plan she considered involved choices that Sarah Mitchell would never make, actions that would compromise everything she had built over the past 15 years. The second encrypted email was waiting when she arrived home. This time, Alina had included a video file that made Sarah's hands shake as she opened it. The video showed her own house, filmed from across the street. The timestamp indicated it had been recorded that morning, just after she had left to take the children to school. David was visible through the kitchen window, completely unaware that he was being watched. Alina's voice provided narration. "Your husband looks like a nice man, Sarah. Very trusting. I wonder how he would react if he knew that the woman he shares a bed with has killed 17 people." The video switched to footage of Emma and James walking into their school. "Your children are beautiful. Emma has your eyes, doesn't she? It would be such a tragedy if they grew up without their mother." Sarah slammed the laptop shut, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and rage. Alina wasn't just threatening to expose her. She was threatening to harm her family directly. The secure phone rang, and Sarah answered without checking the caller ID. "Did you enjoy the video?" Alina's accented voice was calm, almost pleasant. "If you touch my family, I will hunt you down and make you suffer in ways you can't imagine." Alina laughed. "There she is. There's the Agent Nightshade I've been looking for. For a moment I thought suburban life had made you soft." "What do you want?" "I want you to suffer the way I suffered when Victor died. I want your comfortable little life to crumble around you, but I'm not unreasonable. I'll give you a choice." Sarah waited, knowing that whatever choice Alina offered would be designed to destroy her either way. "Option 1, you can pay me £50 million and I'll disappear forever. Of course, we both know you don't have that kind of money." "Option 2, you kill yourself, make it look like an accident, and I'll leave your family alone. They'll never know who you really were." "And option 3, there is no option 3, Sarah. You have 48 hours to decide." The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in the kitchen where she had made thousands of meals for her family, where she had helped her children with homework, where she had lived the life of Sarah Mitchell. But Sarah Mitchell couldn't solve this problem. Only Agent Nightshade had the skills necessary to protect everything Sarah had built. That evening, Sarah sat in her garden watching David work on his vegetable patch, while Emma and James played football on the lawn. This was the life she had chosen, the life she had fought to build after walking away from everything Agent Nightshade represented. Now she had to find a way to save it without losing herself in the process. She went inside and made a call to Marcus Webb. "I need to come in," she said when he answered. "Sarah, we've discussed this. You can't involve MI6 in your personal problems." "Alina Kozlov isn't just threatening me, Marcus. She's threatening to expose 3 other operations from my time with the agency. Operations that are still classified." There was a long pause. "What operations?" Berlin 2006, Moscow 2007, Istanbul 2008. She has evidence of all of them. Marcus swore quietly. Those operations are beyond top secret. If Alina goes public with that information, it will compromise current agents and operations across Europe. Then you need to help me stop her. Another pause. Meet me tomorrow at the old safe house in Hampstead. Come alone and make sure you're not followed. After hanging up, Sarah realized she had just taken the first step back into a world she had sworn she would never re-enter. But protecting her family was worth any sacrifice, even if it meant losing herself in the process. She looked around her kitchen one more time, memorizing the peaceful normalcy of it all. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of becoming Agent Nightshade again. Tonight, she would hold her husband and kiss her children goodnight, perhaps for the last time as simply Sarah Mitchell. The war for her life had begun, and Sarah knew that no matter who won, the woman who emerged from this conflict would be forever changed. The safe house in Hampstead looked abandoned from the outside, but Sarah knew that appearances could be deceiving. She had used this location during several operations in her early career, back when she still believed that the world could be divided into clear categories of good and evil. Marcus Webb was waiting in the kitchen, looking older than Sarah remembered. His hair had gone completely gray, and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of too many difficult decisions over too many years. "You look good, Sarah. Domestic life suits you." "Cut the pleasantries, Marcus. How bad is this situation?" Marcus opened a file folder and spread photographs across the table. Sarah recognized herself in each image, taken during operations she had hoped were buried forever. In Berlin, entering a hotel where a Russian spy would be found dead the next morning. In Moscow, walking away from a cafe where a corrupt official had suffered a sudden heart attack. In Istanbul, leaving a nightclub where an arms dealer had accidentally fallen from a balcony. Alina has all of this. More importantly, she has documentation linking these deaths to official MI6 operations. If this information becomes public, it won't just compromise current agents. It will expose the entire structure of our European network. Sarah studied the photographs, remembering the woman she had been when each was taken. Young, ruthless, completely convinced that her actions served a greater good. Now she wondered how many of those targets had families who loved them, children who never understood why their fathers didn't come home. "What does the agency want me to do?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "Officially, nothing. You're a private citizen now, and this is your personal problem." Unofficially, Alina Kozlov needs to be eliminated before she can release this information. Her death needs to look accidental, and there can be no connection to British intelligence. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You want me to kill her?" "I want you to protect national security. How you choose to do that is up to you." "And if I refuse?" Marcus's expression hardened. "Then you become a liability that the agency can't afford. Your family's safety would no longer be our concern." The threat was subtle but clear. MI6 would abandon her completely, leaving her to face Alina alone. Worse, they might decide that Sarah herself knew too much about their operations to be allowed to live. "I need resources, clean weapons, surveillance equipment, extraction routes. I can provide limited support, but nothing that can be traced back to us. As far as official records are concerned, this meeting never happened." Marcus slid a key across the table. "There's a storage unit in East London. Everything you need is there. But Sarah, once you take these items, there's no going back. You'll be Agent Nightshade again with all that entails." Sarah picked up the key, feeling its weight in her palm. Such a small thing, but it represented the end of 15 years of peace and the beginning of something she wasn't sure she could survive. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "Alina isn't working alone. She has a team of professional operatives, all of them with serious grudges against MI6. This isn't just about her brother anymore. She's built a coalition of people who want to see British intelligence destroyed." "How many?" "At least 6 that we know of. Former Spetsnaz, ex-Mossad, discharged special forces from various countries. Alina has money, resources, and people who are very good at what they do." Sarah processed this information, calculating odds and possibilities. Agent Nightshade had been exceptional, but she had never operated alone against an entire team of professionals. The odds were not in her favor. I need 48 hours to prepare. You have 24. Elena is already in London. Our sources indicate she plans to release the information tomorrow night unless you're dead by then. Sarah left the safe house feeling like she was walking toward her own execution. She had one day to plan an operation that would normally take weeks to organize, against enemies who outnumbered her 6-1, while protecting a family who couldn't know they were in danger. The storage unit in East London contained everything Agent Nightshade had ever needed. Weapons that didn't officially exist, surveillance gear that could penetrate any security system, and documents that could create new identities within hours. There was also something else, a letter she had written to herself 15 years ago, sealed and marked, open only in case of emergency. Sarah broke the seal with trembling hands. Her younger self's handwriting was confident, almost arrogant. If you're reading this, it means the past has caught up with you. Remember who you were before you became Sarah Mitchell. Remember what you were capable of. Your family is depending on Agent Nightshade now, not on the suburban mother you pretended to be. The letter continued with detailed instructions for a contingency plan that Sarah had forgotten she had ever created. Safe houses, weapons caches, emergency contacts, everything she needed to disappear with her family if the worst happened. But disappearing would mean David, and the children would spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, never knowing when Elena or someone like her might find them again. The only way to truly protect them was to end the threat permanently. Sarah spent the rest of the day conducting surveillance on Elena's operation. The woman had taken over an entire floor of a luxury hotel in Mayfair, using it as a base of operations while she prepared to destroy Sarah's life. The security was professional but not impenetrable. Elena was confident, perhaps overconfident, in her advantage. That evening, Sarah returned home to find David cooking dinner while Emma and James did homework at the kitchen table. The scene was so perfectly normal that it took her breath away. This was what she was fighting for, ordinary moments that most people took for granted. "How was your day?" David asked, kissing her cheek as she entered the kitchen. "Productive. I think I'll be able to finish that big project soon." It wasn't entirely a lie. She would finish this project one way or another very soon. After the children went to bed, Sarah sat with David on the couch, watching a movie they had seen dozens of times before. She memorized the feel of his hand in hers, the sound of his laugh, the way he absently played with her wedding ring. "Sarah, is everything all right? You've seemed distant lately." For a moment, Sarah considered telling him everything. The truth about who she had been, what she had done, what she was about to do. But David's life was built on the assumption that the world was fundamentally safe, that evil was something that happened to other people in faraway places. "I'm fine, just tired. Work has been stressful." "Maybe we should take a vacation when you finish your current project. The children have been asking about visiting your sister in Scotland." Sarah didn't have a sister in Scotland, but she had created that fictional relative years ago as part of her cover story. Now the lie felt like a knife in her chest. "That sounds lovely. We'll plan something special." She went to bed early claiming fatigue, but actually needing time to prepare for what was coming. While David slept beside her, Sarah reviewed building plans, studied personnel files, and calculated probability matrices for 17 different approaches to Elena's hotel. Only one plan had a reasonable chance of success, and it required Sarah to do things that Agent Nightshade would have done without hesitation, but that Sarah Mitchell found morally reprehensible. At 3 in the morning, Sarah slipped out of bed and dressed in dark clothing she had hidden in the garage. She kissed David's forehead gently, then went to check on Emma and James. Both children were sleeping peacefully, completely innocent of the violence that was about to unfold to protect them. Sarah left a letter for David, to be found only if she didn't return. It explained nothing and everything. "My darling David, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't come home. Know that everything I was with you and the children was real. The love, the laughter, the quiet moments, that was who I truly am. The rest was just shadows from a life I left behind long ago. Take care of Emma and James. Tell them their mother loved them more than her own life. Be happy, my love. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Sarah sealed the letter and placed it in David's desk drawer, where he would eventually find it if the worst happened. Then she became Agent Nightshade for what she hoped would be the last time. The hotel in Mayfair was exactly as she had expected, heavily secured but with patterns that could be exploited. Alina's people were good, but they were thinking like criminals defending against law enforcement. They weren't prepared for someone who thought like Agent Nightshade. Sarah entered through the service entrance, using skills she had honed over years of infiltration operations. The hotel staff were innocent civilians, so she used non-lethal methods to bypass them. Pressure points that caused temporary unconsciousness, drugs that would leave no lasting effects. Alina's floor was more challenging. The operatives guarding the approaches were professional soldiers, not security guards. Sarah couldn't afford to leave them alive. They would wake up and raise alarms before she could complete her mission. For 15 years, Sarah Mitchell had lived with the knowledge that Agent Nightshade had killed 17 people. Tonight, that number was going to increase, and there was no way to justify it except as necessary evil in service of a greater good. The first guard died quickly and silently, a knife between his ribs before he could react. Sarah felt sick as she lowered his body to the ground, but she also felt muscle memory taking over, reflexes that had been dormant for years suddenly sharp and decisive. Agent Nightshade was back, and she was going to save Sarah Mitchell's family no matter the cost. Alina's suite was at the end of the hallway, guarded by 2 more operatives who had clearly been chosen for their skill and ruthlessness. Sarah could see Alina through the doorway, sitting at a computer, probably putting the finishing touches on her plan to destroy everything Sarah had built. In a few minutes, this would all be over. One way or another, Sarah Mitchell's quiet life in Winchester was about to end forever. The 2 guards outside Alina's suite were positioned to cover all angles of approach, their weapons ready and their attention focused. Sarah studied them from the shadows, calculating distances and timing. These weren't hotel security guards or even criminal thugs. These were soldiers who had been paid very well to keep Alina Kozlov alive. Agent Nightshade would have killed them both without hesitation. But Sarah Mitchell couldn't stop thinking about the fact that these men might have families of their own, children who were waiting for their fathers to come home. The internal conflict paralyzed her for precious seconds. 15 years of peaceful living had changed her in ways she hadn't realized. The cold efficiency that had once defined Agent Nightshade was now fighting against the empathy that defined Sarah Mitchell. A floorboard creaked behind her, and Sarah spun to find a 3rd guard approaching from the service elevator. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of earnest face that reminded her of her son James in 15 years. The guard raised his weapon, but he hesitated when he saw her. Perhaps he had been expecting a team of armed operatives, not a suburban mother in dark clothing. That hesitation cost him his life. Sarah moved with reflexes she had hoped never to use again. Her knife found the space between his ribs, angled upward toward his heart, and the young guard dropped without making a sound. As she lowered his body to the floor, Sarah saw a photograph fall from his pocket, a smiling young woman holding a baby. The sight of that photograph nearly broke her resolve. This man hadn't been a terrorist or a criminal. He had been someone's husband, someone's father, and now he was dead because Sarah needed to protect her own family. But there was no time for guilt or regret. The other 2 guards had heard something and were moving to investigate. Sarah had perhaps 30 seconds before they discovered their colleague's body. She moved quickly but carefully, using the hotel's architecture to her advantage. The hallway had several alcoves where guests could sit and wait for elevators. Sarah positioned herself in one of these alcoves and waited for the guards to pass. When they found their dead colleague, their professional composure cracked slightly. One of them spoke into a radio, reporting the breach to Alina. The other began checking the service areas where an intruder might be hiding. Sarah took the one with the radio first, stepping out of her alcove and wrapping her arm around his throat in a chokehold that cut off his air supply and his ability to cry out. She held him until his struggles stopped, then lowered him gently to the floor. The 2nd guard found her as she was hiding the body. He was faster than she had expected, his weapon already trained on her before she could draw her knife. "Don't move," he said in accented English. "Alina wants to see you alive." Sarah raised her hands slowly, letting him think he had the advantage. "I just want to talk to her." "No talking. You're going to walk into that room and face what's coming to you." As the guard gestured toward Alina's suite with his weapon, Sarah noticed something that gave her hope. He was holding his gun in a textbook grip, exactly the way Special Forces operatives were trained. but textbook grips assumed you were fighting other soldiers in open terrain, not a former MI6 assassin in a hotel hallway. Sarah dropped to one knee and swept his legs, sending him crashing to the floor. Before he could recover, she had his weapon and was pointing it at his head. "I'm sorry," she whispered and pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot would have alerted Alina, but there was nothing Sarah could do about that now. She had to move quickly before Alina could escape or call for backup. Sarah approached the suite's door, knowing that Alina would be ready for her. This wasn't going to be a simple assassination anymore. It was going to be a confrontation between two women who had both lost everything to violence and were now fighting to protect what remained. The suite's main room was empty when Sarah entered, but she could hear movement from the bedroom. Alina's voice called out from behind the closed door. "Agent Nightshade, I was wondering when you would arrive. I must say you're not as efficient as your reputation suggested. 3 dead guards to reach me. The old Nightshade would have done it with 1. Come out, Alina, let's finish this." "Finish what? You killed my brother 15 years ago. Tonight, I'm going to return the favor by killing everything you care about." Alina's laptop was still open on the coffee table, showing a website that was ready to publish everything about Sarah's past. All Alina had to do was click one button, and Sarah Mitchell's life would be destroyed forever. "Your brother was selling weapons to terrorists," Sarah called out. "He was responsible for the deaths of innocent people." "Innocent?" Alina's laugh was bitter. "Tell me, Agent Nightshade, how many innocent people did you kill during your career? How many fathers who never came home? How many children who grew up wondering why their parents had to die?" The questions hit Sarah like physical blows because she had been asking them herself for 15 years. Every peaceful night with David and the children had been shadowed by the knowledge of what she had done in service to her country. "I'm not that person anymore," Sarah said, and realized she was trying to convince herself as much as Alina. "Aren't you? You just killed 3 men to get to me. You're exactly the same person you always were. The only difference is that now you're lying to yourself about it." Alina emerged from the bedroom, and Sarah was surprised by what she saw. She had expected a hardened criminal, someone who looked like the monster she had built up in her mind. Instead, Alina Kozlov looked like a successful businesswoman, well-dressed, attractive, and completely composed despite the violence that had just taken place outside her door. But her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who had spent 15 years planning revenge, someone who had sacrificed everything else in her life to reach this moment. "You know what the funny thing is?" Alina continued, moving slowly toward the laptop. "I used to admire you. When I first learned that Agent Nightshade had killed Victor, I spent months studying your career. You were everything I wanted to be, strong, independent, feared by your enemies." "Alina, don't do this. Your daughter in Switzerland, she doesn't deserve to lose her mother." Alina's composure cracked slightly at the mention of her daughter. "You researched Natasha. Of course you did. Tell me, Agent Nightshade, are you prepared to make her an orphan to protect your own family?" "I don't want to kill you, but I will if I have to. Just like you killed Victor, just like you killed my 3 guards, face the truth, Agent Nightshade, you're a killer. You've always been a killer. The Suburban Mother Act was just another cover identity." Alina's words were designed to hurt, but they also contained a truth that Sarah had been avoiding. She had killed tonight, and part of her had felt the old satisfaction of a mission completed efficiently. Agent Nightshade wasn't dead. She had just been sleeping. "My family doesn't know who I used to be," Sarah said. "They don't deserve to pay for my past. And Victor didn't deserve to die for doing business with the wrong people. But here we are." Alina's hand moved toward the laptop's keyboard. Sarah had perhaps 2 seconds to decide whether she could live with becoming a killer again, or whether she could accept the destruction of everything she had built as Sarah Mitchell. The choice was made for her when Alina's finger touched the enter key. Sarah fired twice, both shots hitting Alina in the chest. The woman who had spent 15 years planning revenge fell backward, blood spreading across her expensive white blouse, her eyes already beginning to lose focus. Sarah ran to the laptop, but it was too late. The website was loading, uploading files that contained photographs, documents, and detailed accounts of Agent Nightshade's operations. In a few minutes, everyone would know who Sarah Mitchell really was. Alina was still breathing, but barely. Sarah knelt beside her, watching the life drain from the eyes of a woman who had been driven by the same desire to protect family that now motivated Sarah herself. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I'm sorry about your brother, I'm sorry about your daughter, I'm sorry about all of it." Elena's lips moved, and Sarah leaned closer to hear her final words. "Now you know how it feels to lose everything." Elena Kozlov died in a luxury hotel suite in Mayfair, her revenge finally complete. Because even though Sarah had killed her, the information was already spreading across the internet, beyond any hope of containment. Sarah's secure phone rang. Marcus Webb's voice was tense. "Sarah, we're picking up chatter about a major intelligence leak. Please tell me Elena Kozlov is dead." "She's dead, but she uploaded everything before I could stop her. The whole world is about to know who Agent Nightshade was." "Then you need to disappear. Right now, take your family and run." Sarah looked around the hotel suite, at the blood on the expensive carpet, at the laptop that was still uploading secrets that would destroy lives across Europe. She had saved her family from Elena's direct threat, but she had also ensured that they would never be safe again. "I can't run, Marcus. My husband doesn't know who I am. My children think I'm just their mother. I can't ask them to abandon their lives because of what I did 15 years ago." "Then they're all going to die, Sarah. Because once this information goes public, everyone you ever hurt, everyone who ever had a grudge against MI6 is going to come looking for you." The line went dead, leaving Sarah alone with the dead woman and the laptop that was systematically destroying everything she had built over the past 15 years. In a few hours, David would wake up and wonder why his wife hadn't come home. Emma and James would get ready for school, not knowing that their lives had just changed forever. Sarah had one more choice to make: disappear without explanation, leaving her family to wonder what had happened to her, or go home and try to protect them from whatever was coming next. She chose to go home, because Sarah Mitchell couldn't abandon her family, even if Agent Nightshade would have considered it the smart play. The drive back to Winchester felt like a funeral procession, carrying her toward a confrontation with the life she had built and the truth she could no longer hide. Sarah arrived home just as the sun was beginning to rise over Winchester. The house looked exactly the same as it had when she left 12 hours ago, but everything had changed. She was no longer Sarah Mitchell, suburban mother and freelance graphic designer. She was Agent Nightshade again, and that meant her family was now a target. She sat in her car for several minutes, watching the windows of her house and trying to find the words to explain 15 years of lies to the people she loved most. How could she tell David that their entire marriage was built on a deception? How could she explain to Emma and James that their mother was someone they had never really known? The front door opened, and David appeared in his bathrobe, clearly worried. He had probably been awake all night when she didn't come home, calling her phone and getting no answer because Agent Nightshade couldn't afford to be tracked. Sarah got out of the car and walked toward him, seeing the relief in his face as he realized she was safe. In a few minutes, that relief would turn to shock, then horror, then probably disgust. She was about to destroy the man she loved by telling him the truth about who she really was. "Sarah, thank God, I was so worried. Where have you been?" "We need to talk, all of us. Wake the children." David's relief immediately transformed into concern. "What's wrong? You're scaring me." "Please, David, just wake Emma and James. We need to have a family meeting right now." 20 minutes later, the family was gathered in the living room where they had shared thousands of ordinary moments. Emma and James were still in their pajamas, confused about why they had been woken up so early on a school day. David sat beside Sarah on the couch, his hand resting on her knee in a gesture of support that broke her heart. Sarah looked at each of their faces, memorizing them one final time as the people who had loved her unconditionally. In a few minutes, that love would be tested in ways she couldn't predict. "I need to tell you something about my past, about who I was before I became your wife and mother." She started with the basics, that she had worked for MI6, that she had been an intelligence operative, that everything she had told them about her previous career had been a lie. She watched David's face carefully, seeing confusion replace concern as he tried to process what she was saying. "I don't understand," David said slowly. "You told me you worked for the Foreign Office, administrative work." "That was a cover story. I was an assassin, David. I killed people for the government." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Emma and James looked at each other, not really understanding what their mother was saying, but sensing that something terrible was happening. David's hand slowly moved away from Sarah's knee. "How many people?" David's voice was barely a whisper. 20, including 3 last night. Last night? David stood up abruptly, backing away from her. "While I was sleeping here worrying about you, you were out killing people." "I was protecting our family. There was a woman named Alina Kozlov who was going to expose my identity and destroy our lives. I had to stop her." "You could have called the police. You could have asked for help." "The police can't handle something like this, David. Alina had a team of professional operatives. She was going to kill all of us if I didn't stop her first." Sarah tried to explain about Prague, about Viktor Kozlov, about the 15 years Alina had spent planning her revenge. But she could see that David wasn't really listening anymore. He was staring at her like she was a stranger who had somehow replaced his wife. "Mummy," Emma said in a small voice, "are we in danger?" The question cut through Sarah's heart because the answer was yes. They were in terrible danger, and it was all her fault. Alina's information had been uploaded to the internet. By now, intelligence agencies around the world were analyzing it, trying to identify current operations that might be compromised. But more importantly for the Mitchell family, criminals and terrorists were also reading it, looking for ways to strike back at Agent Nightshade. "Yes, sweetheart, we might be in danger for a while. That's why I had to tell you the truth." "I think I'm going to be sick," David said, sitting down heavily in his armchair. 15 years, Sarah, 15 years of marriage, and I never knew who you really were. Everything about our life together was real, David. The woman you married, the mother of your children, that's who I really am. The other stuff, that was just a job I had before I met you." "Just a job," David's voice was getting louder, angrier. "You killed people, Sarah. You lied to me every single day for 15 years. How is that just a job?" Emma started crying, and James put his arm around his sister, trying to comfort her. These children who had grown up in a peaceful, loving home were now being forced to confront the fact that their mother was capable of violence they couldn't comprehend. Sarah's secure phone rang, the sound cutting through the family crisis like an alarm. She answered it reluctantly, knowing that whatever news awaited her would make the situation even worse. "Sarah, you need to get out of there immediately." Marcus Webb's voice was urgent. "Alina's information went live 2 hours ago. We're tracking at least 6 different groups that are already mobilizing to find you." "What kind of groups?" "Russian intelligence, Chechen separatists, Irish dissidents, Al-Qaeda affiliates, basically everyone you ever hurt during your MI6 career. They all want revenge, and they all know where you live now." Sarah looked at her family, at David's shocked face and her children's tears, and realized that her choice to come home had put them in immediate danger. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours before the first teams reach your location. You need to disappear, Sarah, right now." Sarah hung up and turned back to her family. "We have to leave, all of us, right now." "Leave," David stood up again, his voice cracking. "Leave our home, our lives, because of what you did." "David, please. I know this is overwhelming, but we don't have time to process it. There are people coming who will kill all of us just to hurt me." "Why should I trust anything you say? You've been lying to me for 15 years. The question was fair, but it was also devastating. Sarah realized that even if they survived the immediate physical threat, her family might never trust her again. The foundation of their relationship had been destroyed by the truth she should have told years ago. "Because I love you," Sarah said simply. "Because despite everything I've done wrong, everything I've lied about, my love for you and Emma and James is the only real thing in my life." David looked at her for a long moment, and Sarah could see him struggling between the man who loved his wife and the man who was horrified by what she had revealed. "What do we need to do?" he asked finally. Sarah felt a surge of relief so powerful that she almost collapsed. David was still angry, still hurt, but he was choosing to trust her when it mattered most. "Pack 1 bag each. Essential items only. We need to be gone in 30 minutes. As the family scattered to pack, Sarah went to her secret cache in the garage and retrieved new identities she had prepared years ago but hoped never to use. David and the children would become the Johnson family from Cardiff. Sarah would be Rebecca Johnson, a woman with no connection to MI6 or Agent Nightshade. The hardest part was leaving the house that had been their home for 8 years. Emma cried when she realized she couldn't bring her entire collection of stuffed animals. James wanted to know when they would be coming back. David said nothing, but Sarah could see him looking around the kitchen one last time, memorizing the place where they had been happy. Sarah drove them to a safe house in the Lake District, a remote cottage that she had maintained under one of her false identities. It wasn't luxurious, but it was defensible and completely off the grid. More importantly, it would give them time to figure out their next move. That evening, after the children had gone to bed in their new temporary home, Sarah and David sat outside and tried to process what had happened to their lives. "Will we ever be able to go home?" David asked. "I don't know, maybe if I can find a way to eliminate all the threats, but it could take years." "And you expect me to just accept that? To live as a fugitive because of choices you made before we even met?" "No, David, I don't expect you to accept any of this. If you want to take the children and disappear on your own, I'll help you create new identities that have no connection to me. You can start over somewhere safe." David was quiet for a long time, and leave you alone to face whatever's coming. "It's not your fight, you didn't choose this." "I chose you, Sarah. Maybe I didn't know everything about you, but I chose to love you. Emma and James chose you as their mother. We're a family, and families don't abandon each other when things get difficult." Sarah felt tears she had been holding back for hours finally begin to fall. "I'm so sorry, David. I'm sorry for lying, for putting you all in danger, for destroying the life we built together." "The life we built together isn't destroyed. It's just complicated now. We'll figure it out." 3 months later, Sarah sat in the same spot outside the cottage, but everything had changed again. She had spent those months systematically tracking down and eliminating the people who posed a threat to her family. Not all of them. She couldn't kill every person who might want revenge against Agent Nightshade. But she had dealt with the immediate threats, the ones who were actively hunting them. David had struggled with her return to killing, but he had also seen the results. Their family was safer now, and they had begun to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of honesty instead of lies. Emma and James had adapted better than anyone expected. Children were resilient, and they seemed to accept their mother's complicated past as just another adult mystery they didn't need to fully understand. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. "Package delivered. Your old life is officially over. New identities are clean and permanent. Congratulations on your retirement from retirement." MI6 had finally done what they should have done 15 years ago. They had created bulletproof new identities for the Mitchell family and eliminated all traces of Agent Nightshade from their records. It had taken the exposure of classified operations and several international incidents, but Sarah's past was now truly buried. The Johnson family would never be able to return to Winchester, but they could build a new life somewhere else. David had found work as an accountant in a small town in Scotland. Emma and James had started at new schools and were making new friends. And Sarah had finally learned to be simply herself, without lies or cover stories or hidden weapons. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah would think about Alina Kozlov and wonder if there had been another way to resolve their conflict without violence. She thought about the young guard whose photograph had fallen from his pocket, and about all the other people whose lives had been affected by her choices. But then she would look at David sleeping beside her, or watch Emma and James playing in their new garden, and she would know that she had made the right decisions. She had protected the people she loved most, even when it meant embracing the darkest parts of herself. Agent Nightshade was finally, truly dead. Sarah Johnson was still learning how to live without lies, but she was no longer afraid of the truth about who she had been or who she was becoming. The secrets were out, the threats had been neutralized, and her family was safe. For the first time in 15 years, Sarah could sleep peacefully, knowing that the past would never again threaten the life she had chosen to build.